Welcome to the Mindset Connection podcast. We are your hosts, Jennifer Clearwaters and Cindy O'Connell. And as you know, in every episode, we are showcasing everyday changemakers who are doing amazing things in the space of mental health and wellness. And we hope that you will find our guest today just as amazing and inspiring as we do.
All right. So today we are talking with an incredible changemaker. And as I introduce my dear friend, Lynn, I will attempt to highlight what she's accomplished locally and beyond. She is the founder and the executive director of Common Ground Grief Center in Manasquan, New Jersey. Lynn is an LPC board-certified art therapist, a fellow in Thanatology. She also voluntarily supervises and trains graduate students. She trains all the facilitators at Common Ground herself. She provides education at local schools. This is all voluntarily. She connects people in the local community. She has presented nationally and locally. She's designed a graduate course on children's grief for Monmouth University, and she's authored a children's book, Little Ruby's Big Change, talking with children about loss. And she is actively involved in research. So this is Lynn Snyder, otherwise known as Badass by her facilitators. Welcome. We are honored to have you here today.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much. It does, as you know, I'm a pretty humble person, so hearing that coming from a different angle is pretty impressive, I guess. I never really looked at it that way, but
it is.
I don't remember how much stuff you've actually done.
I know, exactly.
Yeah, it's a good reminder.
Exactly.
A good reminder.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Common Ground. So I feel like if you've been there, then you know it. But lots of people probably haven't been there or have driven past it, and it looks like a normal building. So they may not have even realized that it's actually there. But, for me being in there, the design of the building itself is just incredible. And for me going in there, it's empowering and also profoundly sad at the same time. And I notice that when people are in there, they can't believe what you've done with every single room. But at the same time, they might feel like they want to cry. So it's really a balance of emotions going in there. So tell us about Common Ground and, what was your inspiration to create a space like that?
The building is an old house, as you know, and we wanted it like that so that kids didn't feel like they were going into a doctor's office. We wanted it warm, nurturing, where they could feel safe in that environment to be able to begin the healing process. Mm-hmm. So I guess we should go back to the beginning of how Common Ground was founded. So it was founded by just a dream, of course. I guess that's how a lot of nonprofits get started, with a dream and a passion and usually no money. So my background, of course, as Cindy said, is I'm a therapist, and I had gone to graduate school. My master's is in art therapy, and I'm also an LPC. So after graduate school, I worked for a group practice for a while. And then I went off and had a private practice, and I worked primarily with kids. That seemed to be my niche. And I loved kids, and I used a lot of art therapy in my practice. And I was in supervision at the time, because as you go for your licensure for counseling and also for art therapy, you need to be supervised. And I strongly feel that all counselors should have outside supervision, because you never know it all. So anyway,
true.
I was going to supervision one day with a lovely woman who was an art therapist, love her dearly. And one day we were talking about death stuff, which doesn't sound so fun, but it was interesting. And she told me about Mount Ida College for death studies. And she had gone there and she had done some of the courses there. And I went home and I said, oh, that sounds interesting. Now, who would think that sounds interesting but me? So I looked it up, and they had a week-long death studies course there over the summer. And Mount Ida, I don't think exists anymore, but it was right outside of Boston. So I signed up for it. I went there for the week and I found it so fascinating. So they had social workers and nurses and all kinds of professionals in the death field, like hospice and, caring for people and whatnot. So on the fourth day, I got to listen to Donna Sherman, who was the executive director at the time of the Dougy Center out in Portland, Oregon. And they are the National Center for Grieving Kids. Their founder actually started the peer support model. So I absolutely loved listening to Donna. She's a captivating speaker. And she had great slide presentations, and it was all showing the children's artwork. And I was just completely captivated. And I said, I got to find out more about this. So she was very approachable. I got to speak with her during breaks and found out that they did a week-long summer institute to train people on how to open up centers. So the following year, off I went to Portland, Oregon. Now, Cindy knows me, little sidebar, that I am one that I follow my gut. So I don't necessarily overthink things ever. If it feels right to me in my heart and my gut, I follow it. So off I went next year to the Dougy Center. And I went with my therapist hat on, so to speak. So day 1, 2, 3, I'm like, I don't really get this peer support stuff, because I'm a therapist. It's like goals and people come in, they want to change, they want to work on themselves. So I said, I just don't know. But on day 4, we got to observe a young kids group and a teen group. And that's when the light bulb went off. And I said, oh, now I know what grieving kids need. They need to be with other kids who get it. And that was profound. Yeah. So finished out the week there. And I said to myself, I'm going to go back and start a center. Very funny because I had no nonprofit experience, no money.
We've been there.
I know you have. And I just had this passion and this gut that was pulling me. And at that time, around 2009, they had a cluster of suicides in Manasquan. Yeah. And there was really no place for the kids to go. They had counselors come in, but that's just for a couple days. So no place for the kids to have some ongoing processing. So anyway, I came back and I talked to some friends about what I wanted to do and who believed in me. They're like, yeah, that sounds really great, to start something. And ignorance is bliss. So I just powered on. I got my own board together because you have to have a board. You have to write your own bylaws. You have to get them through the IRS and all that stuff. There's a lot to setting up a nonprofit. But I did it, as Cindy knows. I did it. I got it done. So I set it up as a nonprofit. I had to think of a name. And the name, here's how the name came to be. And this is the long story because people say to me, why'd you start Common Ground? And most people, I just say it was divine intervention because I don't want to go through the whole story. But anyway, I was driving up the turnpike one day going to pick my son up from the airport. And I said, what do I really know about the kids and families that are going to come to this place? What do I really know? Because I didn't have a parent die. I didn't have a child die. And very quickly, it came to me, well, they're going to be on common ground. And that's what I knew. So I ran it by some people. Everybody loved it. And that was the name. So that's how the name came to be. So we started in the basement of a church. I trained a bunch of people to be facilitators, even though we didn't have a group yet or a space. But I had faith. I took a leap of faith. And ultimately, we started in the basement of a church with 3 kids. And within the first year, it just outgrew and blossomed. And we said, oh, we got to find another space. And still had no money, but again, leap of faith, just kept moving forward. I drove by this where our current location is, and there was a for rent sign up. And I contacted the people and I looked at the space. I loved it. And I didn't know how the heck we were going to pay for it, but somehow we did, got a little money together. And, 15 years later, here we are. And it grew and grew and
15
grew.
years.
Yes, 15 years.
It's crazy.
So that's how it came to be. And I wouldn't trade anything because I learned everything along the way. I didn't know how to read a finance report. I didn't know how to prepare budgets. I didn't know any of that. But
You're an
I
inspiration
loved
to-
learning about it.
Yeah.
And I learned along the way. So would I change anything? Absolutely not.
You had a vision and you made it
And
happen.
the work is the work I know I was meant to do on this
Yes.
earth.
Yeah.
For
And
sure.
I don't miss private practice therapy at all because here it's so different. The people are so grateful for the support
Yeah.
and the stories, I hear all the time. You changed our life. You saved our life. People are just so profoundly grateful. And
Yeah.
it's an honor.
Yeah.
And it's true because there's a woman in my office building that when I mentioned you said, "Oh my God, years ago my husband had passed away and she was wonderful to my kids."
Yes.
Yeah.
I know
So,
who she is. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about just the room design because that's
Yes.
something that's so
I got a little
special.
sidetracked,
No,
but yes.
Yeah,
the
and,
room
and
design.
before she even gets to that, I just want to say before we all started this, we were talking about being a procrastinator.
Yes,
And I
we
think
were.
that Lynn's story
Yeah.
of common ground shows that she has no room in her life for procrastination.
Absolutely
And
not.
she doesn't also have room in her life for others that procrastinate. Quite honestly, she wants everyone to just take it and run with it.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
you did. You're just a great role model for all of us.
Yeah, but also
Thank you.
people would say they would think what you wanted to do is impossible. Like,
Yes.
what do you know about having a nonprofit? What do you know about running a grief center? Like you don't know any of that
Or a grief group.
or anything,
Right?
Right?
Yeah.
You had to train facilitators, so it would seem to many this is an impossible project. So like, I'm not going to do that. And you just said, I'm going to figure it out.
It's interesting you say that because I just did a new facilitator training, and one of the young people that went through the training asked me what was like my greatest attribute, like what did I think about myself, like a word. And I thought for a second, and as you know, again, I'm pretty humble. I don't really like to talk about myself, but I thought and I go, fearless. And it was such a great word because I am fearless and you can't tell me no because I'll find a way. That's number one. And I'll try. I'm not afraid of trying. I'm not afraid of failure. I'm not afraid of mistakes. So I learned this about myself, and that's even hard for me to say because I don't really like to talk about myself.
Well, whoever's listening, you better hear that.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
fear
With those
impacts
so
us
much
so
wisdom.
much.
So much wisdom.
And fear will stop you from doing the things that you want. So you're hearing it from Lynn.
Yeah.
You got to
Yeah.
be fearless.
All you can do is stumble, right?
Yes.
And you get
and
back
pick
up.
yourself back up. Exactly.
So the rooms.
The
Yes,
rooms
we
are
got a little.
just-
yeah.
I have a
impactful.
feeling this time
Yeah.
is going to fly. We're not even going to have enough time. But
Yeah.
anyway, the rooms. So the house is set up. We have a big room that we call our sharing room or talking circle room. And that's for the little kids, the 6 to 12-year-olds. And we start them out in that room with a grief-related activity. For their hour-and-a-half group, they get about half an hour of circle time where I've designed a lot of activities. I even created an activity book. So it gets them talking about their feelings through the back door, so to speak, in a fun, creative way. And so that's one room. We have a music area. We have an art room. We have sand play. We have puppet dress-up room. And we have a basement, which I call Emotion in Motion, which has pool, ping pong, foosball, board games, because no one's ever allowed to bring their phones into group with them. So we have old-fashioned board games. And we have what we call our boom boom room, which is an all padded room with a punching bag equipped with boxing gloves, because a big part of the kids' grief is anger. So they get to let it all out there. Oh, and we have a full-scale play hospital room, which looks exactly like a hospital room.
It does.
And some people don't understand why we have it. We have it because many of the kids who come to the center have experienced their person in the hospital, saw them die, or perhaps didn't get to say goodbye to them, or had hospice at home. So to them, it's familiar setting. And we are very play focused with the younger kids. So we don't call it play therapy, but in essence, it is the principles of play therapy of what goes on in those rooms.
So one of the things you just said is you referred to it as their person. Is that the way you? So
yes. So
talk
in
about that
in the field of childhood bereavement, or Thanatology, we call it, we don't say loved one, because some people don't feel that way about the person who died. Especially if there was abuse, really bad situations. So we're very mindful of language. So it just rolls off my tongue to say their person. I rarely say loved one anymore.
That makes sense.
And the facilitators, I mean, I've sat in the groups, I've done little things on mindfulness there, and I noticed that that's the language, and all the facilitators are using the language.
We try.
So what about the back room? What about the garage? Who's there?
So the garage.
My next question.
There we go.
How about the parents?
Yes. So the parents. So we do believe in supporting the family as a whole. So we also have a parent support group that runs at the same time that the kids and teens are in their groups. So it's on the same premises, but it's a finished off room in the garage. It's quite nice. And that's where they get their support. We do know through studies, research, that how well that surviving parent does directly affects how well the child is going to do in their grief. So we really believe in supporting them as well. And typically what happens is a parent's or caregiver's grief gets put on the back burner when their spouse or someone in their life dies. That's very significant to them. So they will push their grief away and not think about it and not deal with it because, number one, they're usually all working. Then they've got kids to raise, and they're running around getting their kids to various activities. They come home, they're trying to make dinner. So they typically don't even think about their own grief. They're just pushing forward. And their primary goal is to make sure their kids are okay. Right. But we know that's not healthy for them. So it is important. And that's where they get to unload it all. And, 2 times a month to be able to just sit there and be with others who get it is pretty profound because nobody else really gets it. And our society thinks that, 3 days leave for grief, and people get tired of listening to it. And they think, 6 months, you should be over it. Move on. And this is what grievers hear. And we know that's not the case.
Now, how long can kids stay with you?
So the program is ongoing. And that's a beautiful thing because kids understand their loss differently as they grow. So the 6-year-old coming into our program understands the loss much differently than, say, the 9-year-old versus the teen. So they process it differently, and sometimes it gets more complicated with the processing. And often with teens, it can get more difficult because they start to reach so many milestones in high school. And that constantly reminds them of the absence of their person. So we've had kids start out in a little kids group and stay right through high school graduation. And then they come back to volunteer. And that's the best gift of all. This past training, we had 3 former participants come back, and they're now volunteers.
That says it all about your program.
That's the best.
Incredible.
And I'm hoping one day to bring those kids onto the board, to have one of them as a board member. Full circle.
Yeah, that's great.
That's
How many
amazing.
facilitators do you actually have?
65 right now.
65 people
That's just
Yes.
fantastic.
who are doing this extraordinary work.
Yes.
So
Extraordinary. They are the heart and soul of the program. They truly are. There would be no program without them.
yeah.
And we have a high retainage rate with them, so they stay
They're
and
doing
stay.
meaningful work.
I don't have a big turnover of them.
Yeah.
So it's not that they stay for a year and leave. They stay for years.
Yeah.
Because they love it. And because ultimately we're all there to heal ourselves always. We all carry grief in us and with us.
Very
right?
true.
And so they get so much out of it.
So, and we can see that they're getting a lot of support from you.
Yes.
It's not like they walk in there. I know sometimes volunteers are just, okay, you're going to just work with these kids, but they're not really given a program. So tell us what a typical session would be for the younger ones. You kind of explored that a little bit. And then for the older, for the teens. Just, a few words about how it runs.
And I will also address that support for the volunteers too.
Yes, great.
So 2 parts here. So little kids groups are every other week. They're from 7 to 8:30. And we group 6 to 12-year-olds together and teens together. And we also have a young adult support group for 19 to 30-year-olds, which is a very robust group.
Is that new?
We've had that for a number of years, and that's grown. And that's a really hard age because they feel so in between, and they often feel even more isolated, especially if they're off to college or they went off and then decided they can't do it. They need to be home and be local. So it is a pretty robust group. But anyway, the little kids, their first 30 to 40 minutes is in their talking circle time. They always do an activity, and then they get to process that activity. I think adults have the notion that little kids can't be philosophical and deep, and quite the contrary. Sometimes they have stayed in their circle time for an hour processing very deep, intense stuff. So it's really an honor to watch don't underestimate them. So then the middle part of group, after that 30 to 40 minutes, they get playtime, and they get to use the entire house and go in whatever room they want, roam around. They can go from the art room to the basement, wherever they want, and they get to play because play is their language. And secondly, they have control over what they get to do, because now their world is a little out of control, right? It's turned upside down. Their foundation's rocked to the core. So those 2 times a month, they have control. And that is, for the counselors out there, very Rogerian, very Carl Rogers. So provide the space for them. They know what they need to do to heal themselves. So that is the playtime. And then the last 15 minutes of group, they are back in circle time. We get them settled down, we turn down the lights, and they do candle lighting to honor their person who died. So always the same beginning, middle, and end.
Routine
and structure.
Routine.
Structure. Safety,
Support.
of course, safety. So safety is first, and we have rules for safety, and we keep them safe, and no child is alone anywhere in the house, because on a group night for little ones, we have probably 7 to 8 volunteer facilitators there.
Okay, so what about the teen group?
And
what does that look like?
Teens, again, hour and a half. They have their own designated room. They get pizza and soda. And big shout out to Jim Esposito of Esposito's Pizza and Pasta, because he provides our pizza for 3 teen groups all year.
Oh my goodness.
At no cost.
Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, he's just a gem, and we are so grateful for him, and he's been doing that for years. So teens, they get pizza, soda. Teens like to be fed. They have all kinds of snacks, and they sit on the couch and talk for an hour and a half. Never a shortage of what they
And you
need
run
to
those
talk about.
groups?
I run 2 of
Two
the
of them.
teen groups. 2 of the 4 teen groups. I said 3, but 4.
All right, so we're going to switch gears just a little bit.
What was
so,
I was going
yeah,
to
you get-
address the support
for
the support for the
volunteers.
yes,
the
yes.
volunteers.
Yep.
So the way that works is I have group leaders that actually are in charge of facilitating that talking time and leading their team, and they provide the pre-meeting. So the volunteers have to come a half an hour prior to starting a group. We talk about, how are you doing? What do you need to leave outside the door so you can be fully present? They learn the activity for the night, etc. And then after group, we give them 45 minutes or so of, we don't call it supervision, but post-meeting, but it's like supervision. And, that's where we talk about the evening, what went good, what didn't go so great, what kid pushed your buttons, what affected you, and all that sort.
It's really good.
Yeah.
That's
So-
excellent.
So they get a lot of support, and they develop such a cohesive sense with their team. So they really get quite bonded.
Mm-hmm.
And then the group leaders, they're terrific, and they write me summaries after every group. So, and then I give them supervision in return.
That's great.
Yeah.
So the volunteers are key, and group leaders are key, and they're hard to find because it's a certain skill set.
It is a skill set.
Yeah.
But you do all the training. So you have
Do.
created this training.
Yes.
You and I know that it's 2 weekends, I'm pretty sure, right?
It's 2 weekends. It's always in September. It's always the 2 weekends after Labor Day. And we do ask our volunteers to commit for 1 full year because the kids form strong attachments, and we don't want
Absolutely.
people leaving throughout, mid-year. That's just, the kids have already experienced a profound loss. So we don't need them experiencing that again to a facilitator they may have been attached to.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Makes sense.
the training is wonderful. It's really about active listening, about summarizing, about the skills of reflection. And I always say people really stink at listening. And we really emphasize and develop the skills to have them listen. And I always tell them, you take these skills way beyond the walls of Common Ground,
Mm-hmm.
because people don't listen. Or do you ever get the person who says, "Hey, how you doing? Good?" And they don't even wait for your response.
That's the American way.
It's the American way. So we teach them that active listening, about being fully present,
It's a hard
because
skill these days. with
that's a really
technology.
hard skill with
Yes, it is.
technology. So everybody leaves that phone outside the doors, and really looking in someone's eyes and being fully present is profound.
It
And
is.
listening.
It
Healing
is.
experience.
And
Yes.
summarizing what somebody said to you and giving that back to them
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
profound. What does it say? It says, "Wow, you heard me.
Yeah.
I
See,
I
hear,
matter.
validate.
I matter. You actually listened to what I said, and
Yeah.
you matter."
Yep. you do
So
that.
Lynn, you're not only helping the children, the teens, the parents, the facilitators are given so much support and room to grow, and life skills. I mean, you can learn life skills at 30, at 50, at 70, it doesn't matter. So, wow, that's wonderful work.
And I
wonderful
think the
work.
learning to listen is
Ugh.
a huge skill. As we talk about it, I even talk about it in therapy. I'll say to people, "How do you know when someone's not listening?" And if you ask kids that,
hmm
they know. No response. You're looking up at your phone. You're not listening. Like they
Right.
can tell
Body
you.
language.
Body
You're
language,
looking
they
all over the
know.
place.
Yeah.
They know when
Yeah.
someone's not listening.
Oh,
So to
yes,
have
they
somebody
do.
have that presence with them is just so powerful.
It's a gift.
It's a gift.
And
Yeah.
I'll bring up in training about presence. I will always say, for those who have children, remember when your kids were little, and we had a playroom when the kids were growing up, and they had all their toys in there and a TV, and they would just want me to come in and be there. They didn't necessarily care that I played with them, but they just wanted my presence there.
Mm.
And really, that's what it's about. Presence is profound.
Yeah.
Sure is.
Yeah, Lynn, it seems to me that every step, like bringing that up about your own children, you have taken all these things that happen in your own life and taken them to support this whole program as well.
But I wish
So,
I knew it when I was younger.
we all do,
Oh,
right?
this is
I
the wisdom of aging,
Yes.
the wisdom of life
Yes.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what's some helpful information for parents? So, I feel like people don't know what to say when there's a loss of life. So, what do we say when there's a death? What do the parents say to their own children? What do you tell kids to say to other kids? This is a big question.
Or even like if you have kids in school, sometimes the
Yes.
teachers don't know what to say.
Yes.
We've experienced that when,
Yes.
all of our years working in schools where we've had to run, grief groups and crisis counseling. And we would have kids come in and say, like, I went to one class and they still gave the biology test. And we went to another class and they didn't mention it at all. And then the other teacher shut down the whole classroom, wanted to talk about it. Like people do not know what to do.
Right.
Especially the adults.
Right. So I always say the best advice is to ask the kids,
What do you need?
what do you need?
I think that's good advice for everybody.
Yes.
And also the bullying that takes place for kids who have had a loss is horrific.
Really?
And I just heard this in my teen group the other night. And all the kids chime in on this always. I've heard this over the years for a long time. They'll say, "Oh, where's your mom? Oh, yeah, I forgot she's 6 feet under." Or
Wow,
if I
that's
had a
awful.
kid like you, I'd kill myself too. So I have heard I could
And these are
write
from
down
peers?
hundreds of things.
Peers saying this to each other.
So this is in their group when they talk
When they talk
about,
about it.
we'll just ask them like, how do other kids support you? Or how many of you have had someone be mean to you because of your loss?
Mm.
And all of them will raise their hand. Just happened this past week, right in group. And they all had experiences of it.
Wow.
That is horrific. And it happens a lot. And nobody gets in trouble for it. And one kid, one young teen, he said, yeah, somebody said something really mean to me. And I was on the playground and I hit him.
Oh.
And he got in trouble and he got expelled. But, he was angry.
And what are we doing to address what was said to him?
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And with social media now and their phones, it's very easy
Yeah, it is.
to attack.
So
And that's why the groups are so good for them.
yeah. Do you know where that's coming from? That teens
meanness?
would the meanness. Where is that coming from?
You're-
I know. I'm just
Yeah,
I'm
like,
just
They're
curious.
mean.
I
People
know
are
kids
mean.
are mean.
Mhm.
They're mean. Like kids tell
Adults
me
are
I don't
mean.
even want to have a lot of friends anymore. I just have like a couple of friends. I just stay in my own little place because kids are so mean.
Yeah.
It's really sad.
It is very sad. So what do you tell, so ask the kids what they need. What about kids, you're my good friend and your mother just died. So what would you say that a kid is going to say to another kid? Same thing. What do you need?
Well, the kids, yeah, we ask them this question, and I actually have a brochure on friends helping
I know
friends.
you do,
Yes.
but I
Yeah.
wanted to bring it up.
So, one thing that's great to say is, I heard about your mom, and I don't know what that's like, but I just want you to know I'm here for you in whatever you need. And the kids will always say they don't like the phrase, I'm sorry. Like that's been written about so much because
Yeah.
people do say I'm sorry and well-intentioned, right?
Yes.
People, I think for the most part, are well-intentioned and they're
yeah,
awkward.
they
They
do.
don't know what to say.
So they'll say the
But,
wrong things.
they'll
often.
say, or, you say, wow, that must really suck. Like, I'm really sorry that's happened to you, but I'm here for you.
Mhm.
And I want you to know that.
Yeah, so then they're not focusing on the I'm sorry, they're focusing on I'm here for you.
Yes, I'm here
I'm
for
for
you.
you.
Whatever you
Whatever
need.
you need.
And also,
So-
a lot of times, anybody who's grieving likes to talk about their person, but other people are so uncomfortable because they think, oh my God, I don't want to make them cry. I don't
Yeah.
want to upset them. But most of the kids in our program say, we want to talk about our person, but no one will bring it up. Nobody will talk about it. And so just a nice thing to ask them is, tell me about your mom. What was she like? What'd you guys like to do together? You know, to have that conversation. Or kids that don't have memories because they were very young when their person died, is to share a memory if you knew that person. They love that.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
oh, I
helpful.
used to do this with your mom. We went out shopping and your mom was so funny. Like, they
Yeah.
love the memories.
Mhm.
This is so important for
So
people
important for
to
people
hear,
to know this.
because
Yeah.
I think many people, just when, getting back to the beginning, when you talked about you were fascinated by death, whereas most people are like, "Whew, I don't want to talk
Okay,
about
so
death."
you know what I used to do as a little kid? I would walk through graveyards.
Okay. You were meant to
But
do
you
this
were
work.
I
meant
was
do
meant to
this.
do it.
You were meant to
My
do
dad
this.
and I, we walked through old graveyards and we loved it.
They're
That
they're
sounds a little
fascinating.
crazy, but I do. I love graveyards.
But that's
Yeah.
why
And
you're
I
the
love to
perfect
look at the
person.
headstones, and
Mhm.
you know, some of them are just so old. And
Yeah.
even to this day, I like to go to graveyards. I think they're just, I don't know. It's an honor to be walking amongst those people.
Wow, listen to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I have a question for you. Because
Yes.
of the work that you do, you deal with sadness every day, all day long. So, how do you personally cope with what you see and what you hear at Common Ground during your groups?
Yeah. So I do get asked that question a lot. I will say I was put on this earth. I have a huge vessel to hold the so to speak.
Mhm.
So I can sit in the most horrible stuff with people and feel totally at peace and comfortable, as crazy as that sounds. So when new families come in, they always have to come in for an orientation first before they start a group. And that's when I'm one-on-one with them and I hear the stories. And a lot of the stories are horrific. But I am able to sit and be fully present and to be okay with hearing those stories. So it doesn't like rattle me so much. And I can't really explain that or why, but it's something I'm just good with, I guess. And
Again, you were meant to do
Yeah,
this.
meant to
Meant to
do this
do it.
work.
You're
Meant to do
so,
this work.
and
Yeah.
what I focus on when I leave the center is that we did something so wonderful for people and help them. And that is enough, because I can't help the whole world. I can only do what I can do. And Common Ground is there. And we're there on group nights, present in the moment to help those families and those kids and those teens. And you walk away that night, and I just take a deep breath in and just thank myself for showing up and for being there for them.
That's a really good message, though, for everyone to hear, and not even just in the work that you're doing, but to say, like, you're doing what you can do.
Yes.
And you feel
Yes.
take pride and you're happy with what you can do. Because I think oftentimes people feel like they have to help everyone or do everything, or it has to be perfect.
Yes.
And when it's not, then it's like, oh, it's a failure.
And it's
So-
like when I came out of graduate school as a young therapist, right? And
Yeah,
you
you think you need to gotta help everyone.
you think you're going to save the world.
Yes,
That
yes.
you are going to be the therapist that's going to help this
You are
one
saving a lot of people.
after
You are,
they went
but-
to like 10 other therapists.
Yeah.
And you're
Right.
like, well, I'm going to be the one that's going to help them, right? But then wisdom, I guess,
Mhm.
comes with age and
Yes.
that wisdom. And you say, I can't do that. But what I can do is focus on my little piece of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And be okay with that.
Yeah. And I feel like the phrase self-care is so overused, but I take care of myself through exercise and yoga and being with friends and vacation and
And good connection with family. I mean, you,
connection.
there's no question.
Yeah, so I never feel like I'm carrying it.
Yeah.
And I really don't.
So, I'm fascinated by empathy, compassion, and I think that people become, when they take on others' suffering, then they have empathy fatigue. You are a compassionate person, so you are able to, like, it's not that you are caring for the people. You're not suffering along with them. You're offering them the care. And that's compassion would be a great description for you, but you're living proof of empathy versus compassion.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I don't let it seep into my
Yes,
pores, so to
yes,
speak.
yeah.
I mean, it's in my heart, and I have huge compassion, and I'm an empathetic person, but you can't let every piece of that
can't.
seep into you
You can't.
because the stories and what you hear are so hard.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
just have to know that you're doing the best you can in the
Exactly.
moment.
Exactly.
So research.
Yes.
So what are you doing in
So
research?
we just had a study done. We worked with UNC Charlotte, and this is another one of my moments where I said, what about this? So over the years, I have thought about, do our support groups really help kids grow? And by grow, I mean post-traumatic growth, which is a term that we know in the field. And that is really about taking something, whether it's trauma or something life-altering that happened to you, and kind of learning from that, so to speak, and growing from that. And that's, there's a lot written about post-traumatic growth.
Yes.
But I just got to thinking, because at the end of the year, I would do this art activity with the kids. And it was, I think I had them fold a piece of paper, and I said, on one side, I want you to draw what happened. And on the other side, how have you changed from this? And I got all this artwork, and I brought it home with me and looked at it over the summer, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is post-traumatic growth.
Yeah.
So my dear friend Pamela and I looked at it, and we're like, we got to do something with this. And my whole premise was, do peer support groups foster post-traumatic growth in kids? And we took that, and we contacted a top-notch researcher at UNC. Now, again, I'm never afraid to ask or try, and never thought this guy would respond, because he's like the badass researcher in the
Why is he gonna
field.
call me?
And
But you're a badass.
he's published a lot on post-traumatic growth and kids. He did work with the Hurricane Katrina kids. So he's pretty badass. But I'm like, I'm going to look him up and email him. And he emailed back. And he's like,
Of
I'm
course
very
he did.
interested in talking with the two of you.
Wow.
And so it went on from there. And what happened is, our research was, we had numerous phone calls with him, and, we worked out everything. Our research was set to go off, and COVID hit. We had the
course.
funding from UNC to do it. Everything was green light, ready to go, and COVID hits. Now, again, you're not going to tell me no, so I'm going to find another way. And the funding was there. We had to use the funding. Every center had shut down in the country. Everything was shut down. We shut down those 3 months in the spring of 2020. And then in the fall, our family said, we want to come back. We need to come back. So we started our groups at the Allaire Community Farm in the fall.
So much
Outside.
initiative.
And then after that, our family said, we want to come back. So we went back with masks on, and we did our groups, and with little incident, but we got our study done. And so even though it was a very small sample size, it was significant. And then just recently we did, they got it all into a document.
Wonderful.
And it's amazing, and it's going to be published, which is very, very cool.
That's wonderful.
So it will be in
Congratulations.
professional
Yeah.
journals, and we have the write-up. And what it did show is that, yes, the kids and the families benefit from their support groups, and that there's a correlation with hope, because we used what they call the hope scale, and that there was a correlation with hope and post-traumatic growth.
Wow.
And a bunch of other things, too much to go into detail.
Amazing.
So
But
amazing.
pretty amazing. I'm really, really proud of that. So it's exploring post-traumatic growth with grieving kids.
Yeah. Well, we're running out
Yeah.
of time, which we knew. So I want to ask
Okay.
you to let people know, if they're listening or they're watching this, where can they find out more about you, and where can they get information on your book that is out, and also the status of your second book that you are writing?
Okay. So you can visit our website, commongroundgriefcenter.org. We are on Facebook. We are on Instagram. And let's see, Little Ruby's Big Change I wrote during COVID because I had gotten a little puppy during that time. And what happened is we had to go pick her up, and she was handed off to me through the car window because we couldn't go in and get her or anything. So I looked at that, and I just remember, here she comes through the window, and it was so sad to me. Like, wow, she didn't get to, it was like kind of just a cold way to,
Here she is.
there she is. And so that sparked the book. And the book is really not, it's a little bit about COVID, but a lot about loss and change. And that you can email me directly because I have copies, and it comes with a little Ruby puppy stuffed animal.
Oh, cute.
And then the
great.
second book is coming out hopefully in the spring. It's called Life on Pause, supporting grieving kids and teens. And that is being written for any parent or caregiver, school counselors, anybody who knows a grieving kid and doesn't know what they're thinking and feeling and how to support them.
Well,
And
This
it's
is
got
just what we talked about.
And it's you'll be dropping off multiple copies
Tons-
everywhere
Yes,
you go.
I
yes.
know people are very excited
Yeah,
about
yeah,
this,
no, it's
and
gonna
it's
be
got
great. Know what to
tons
say.
of the kids' artwork. So there's tons of scholarly books written about kids and grief. I'm a visual person.
gotta
I
see
didn't
it.
want that. So it's limited in the words, but profound in the images. And it will have tips also at the end of every chapter.
Nice.
So,
wonderful.
yeah, so it's all the stuff that I've learned from kids over the many years. So I'm very excited.
We are too.
All right.
And
Great.
just real quick, Life on Pause, 2017, I had this young man in a teen group. His name is Scotty. And he said one day in group, he goes, I feel like my life is on pause and everybody's life is going on around them except mine.
Wow.
Makes sense.
And I've heard
Yeah.
people say that over the years. So I left group that night. I went home. I wrote that down on a Post-it note, 2017. And I said, that's going to be the title of my next book. And my forward is about Scotty. And I've gotten to see him a couple of times.
Wonderful.
And some updates on Scotty in the forward. So.
Great.
So we have some final questions. So I'm going to work through them quickly. So Lynn,
In
I
1
just want to
minute?
say,
We'll be
you
good.
are an observer of life.
Yes.
And that is a high compliment. So you talked about failure. We know what your strengths are. I even know what's going well in your life, but these are my typical questions, but you kind of covered them all. How to take care of yourself. You did all that. Is there something in your life that you want to change?
Nope.
I knew you were going to say no. So then the rest of the questions are, we don't
Good.
need to ask them.
No, she's good. Yeah.
She's the second one on here.
That's right. Because most
we
people
are,
always
we
say
are picking them well.
we got the good ones, people who are satisfied
All right.
with life. But all right, well, thank you so much for coming to our show. This is an amazing episode. We knew it was going to be good.
We did. We could have
But-
talked more.
Wow, we could have talked for a whole nother hour.
I know we could have.
So maybe we're going to have you come back for round
Part
two.
two.
Part two.
Yeah.
But thank you for listening. And again, every episode will be showcasing another wonderful person doing great things in the mental health and wellness space. And if you want to learn more about Cindy or about me, our book, The Elevation Principles, is out. You can order that on Amazon. My website is www.mindsetnj.com, and Cindy's is www.mindfulnessconnection.com. We are both on social media. We both have YouTube channels, and we hope that you'll look for us, and we'll see you next time.
And remember to pause, breathe, and then respond.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.